Hi, welcome to the Israel First television program from our studios in Jerusalem. Great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us today with a program that brings you news from Israel and views from a Hebraic perspective. And I'm here today with my wife Nathalie Blackham, and we're going to go through some of the major news stories which you need to know about. Some of them behind the scenes, not the ones that the mainstream media are covering. Well, the first story we've got today is Haaretz News, which is a local news source in Israel. It's a newspaper in Israel. You can get it delivered, and it's also an internet site and producing news, maybe from a left-wing perspective, but anyway, it's good to have all different perspectives when you're looking at the news. Now, Haaretz News says, after October the 7th, elderly kibbutzniks, what are kibbutzniks? Those are people who live on kibbutzim, struggle with an uncertain future. Now, you may know or may not know that many people were evacuated from the southern and indeed the northern communities after October the 7th. Particularly the south at first was a lot of people were evacuated, and then in the north. The evacuation of kibbutzim after October the 7th left the older members, that's the elderly, in a quandary. The support infrastructure on the kibbutz that enabled them to live independently vanished in an instant. With heavy hearts, they've adjusted to a completely different way of life. Will it be that, this is the question they all ask, will it ever be possible to go home? They don't consider where they've been moved, which was allegedly temporary accommodation, but doesn't seem to be temporary in my estimation. Will they ever go back to their home, inverted commas, the place where they feel happy, the place where they were enjoying life?
I know, and kibbutzim, there is a lot of freedom there.
Right.
People need to know there is a net, a social net, but you're very free, you're in your own home, you have your own garden, all this kind of thing, which is like pleasure of being independent. Even if they are old, they love to have this independence.
Yeah, some people might say they're a bit eccentric, some of them, but the interesting thing is there's a great deal of, as Nathalie was saying, of freedom, which sadly and unfortunately there isn't in the places they've been moved to. Now, when Sarella Shimron from kibbutz Nahal Oz next to the Gaza Strip moved to Bat Yam, the branch of Migdal Hayom Hachion chain of assisted living facilities. A lot of them, the elderly, had to go because they had support networks in the kibbutz. They didn't have that anymore, so they couldn't put them in a hotel or in a lodgings or bed and breakfast. They had to put them in assisted living facilities. She found herself for the first time at the age of 87 encountering what she calls a vertical way of life. Living high up, this is in an apartment block. Living high up is something I've never experienced before, Shimron relates. All my life I was earthbound. With a big garden, having to go up and down an elevator suddenly wasn't very pleasant. I'm still having a very hard time getting used to it. So in that sense, the move here was very difficult. So she is now in an apartment block.
Yeah. And Bat Yam is in the south of Tel Aviv.
Right. So very different location, very different atmosphere, very different, and just not nice. Just not nice for the people.
No, too nice for them, because some are saying it's like an aquarium, or some are saying it's like a golden cage, because they have everything, the meals are done, they don't need really to do shoppings and all of that, but they lost their freedom. Right. This is the main thing for them.
Shimron arrived 68 years ago in kibbutz. I mean, that's a long time to live in a particular place. She arrived 68 years ago at kibbutz Nahal Oz, which is in the south, which had been founded 5 years earlier. So she arrived only 5 years after the kibbutz had been founded and intended to remain there forever. Assisted living was never on the agenda. The truth is that the kibbutz provides people our age all their needs. I never thought I would live in these conditions. This is called a home, but it's not my home. Offer a Hartav, sorry, 82 says, we don't have to make an effort. Everything is spoon-fed to us. If you haven't come downstairs by 8:30, 8:45, they come to check that you're still alive. We're totally protected, but there's something about it that saps your independence, which Nathalie was talking about earlier. It's a way of life we're not familiar with. Dove, this is interesting, this is the aquarium quote, Dove Eliezer 88 likens the experience to living in an aquarium. They provide you with everything, physical activity and cultural activity and intellectual activity, meals, internet access and shopping. Actually, you don't need to go out for anything. So you're stuck like the goldfish in the doctor's surgery in an aquarium. Young Kelly Cohen, who's here with his wife Sarah, both of them were founders of Nahal Oz, and both of whom will celebrate their 90th birthday. Sums it up like this: we're in a gilded cage, but it's still a cage. Every 2 weeks, Dove Eliaz. Some of these names are a bit tricky, because they're
Jewish.
Yeah,
I mean Hebrew.
Hebrew names.
Yeah, Hebrew.
Leaves his apartment in Bat Yam and goes to the kibbutz to mow the lawns. So he's staying in Bat Yam. That's where they've evacuated. All these people have been evacuated out of the south of Israel to Tel Aviv, which is in the middle of Israel. And so Dove, he leaves his apartment in Bat Yam and goes to the kibbutz to cut the grass, to mow the lawns. I shower, sit in the armchair and don't budge from it. For me, home and garden are connected. To see everything dried up and neglected is a pretty sad sight. On the day they say it's possible to return, I will go back without one hesitation. For Dov Saliman, these are all old people who are suffering because they haven't even been given a choice. They have been removed from their homes.
And they are old people who were pioneers in Israel many years ago. So, like you see, this couple, they were there for pioneer the kibbutz. So they have something in them. I tell you, you hear the how old they are, but they are full of energy.
Mm-hmm.
They have something. They still have a zest of life. And here when you have your birthday, they say to your 120. So they 88, all of that for them is not very old. There are still loads of energy inside of them. They love their freedom. They were pioneer, and they don't like this kind of
no. And it's not normal
new life, which is cocoon life. But they don't want that.
It's not a normal life.
No.
I don't think for anybody, but anyway, it's not a normal life. They're stuck in an apartment. Now on a kibbutz, you can always do stuff.
Yeah, you have the fresh air. Like the lady was saying, I'm on the ground. I'm around my flowers. The grass, and I've been in kibbutz in the south, and they are beautiful.
And in a kibbutz, you can help. Now the elderly do stuff. They don't just sit in the garden on a deck chair. They are actually helping, and you'll find them painting or gardening or doing something. They want to be involved. A kibbutz is very much, even though the kibbutz system has really kind of stopped virtually in Israel. The ones that are still going, but they're not doing new ones. The kibbutz system was that everybody works together in community, and so that's what they were used to. And so to be in a separate apartment away from all their friends, family, neighbors up in the sky when they were on the ground in their kibbutzim, looking at the sunsets, looking at the evening outside on the porch, and now they're stuck in an apartment. So there's a lot of suffering, and these are elderly people who can't really do so much. Some of the younger people can choose where they want to live, and and try and live somewhere similar to the kibbutzim, or indeed on another kibbutzim somewhere else in Israel. So there are choices, but these people are very limited as to their choice, and they really are suffering. Dan Salomon, 86, and his wife Eleanor, both American-born, who have been members of Nahal Oz since 1970, are full of pain. The last time we were on the kibbutz, he says, it was hard for me to come back here. That's the new apartment, the new accommodation. When I got to my house and sat in my chair, I just couldn't bring myself to get up. It's lovely in Bat Yam. That's where they've been moved to. The room is fine, the food is fine, but I want to die in my own house in my own bed. So this is really old elderly people who are suffering in Israel because of the war, because the direct consequence was that some people said it was a mistake, particularly as Israel has so much control over Gaza. They were like, well, why on earth did they move all the people from the south?
And the legacy of these people, they've built Israel, they built the land, they gave all the energies to build the kibbutzim and to make Israel what is Israel today. So it's a big thing for them.
Now Rivka Cantor, she's 88, who has moved from Ein Hashlosha with her husband. Ein Hashlosha is my home, she said. We lived there for 60 years. If I could, I would go back tomorrow. When I visit there, I feel happy, and here it's just living. So it's really sad to see that they've had to go to be evacuated. And as I say, a lot of them is sad because they should be back in the south. They should be back in their kibbutz. That to me is the ultimate priority of the government, to take the people who are evacuated back to their homes. But anyway, there's all sorts of reasons why that's not happening. But it's a very sad situation. But it's important for you to know, because there's a lot of suffering in Israel, not just with the war, but there's people who've been like these elderly people who've been evacuated, who are suffering, not being where they have pioneered, where they have spent a lot of their lives. It's a long period of time.
They built the land of Israel.
So
they are the pioneer of Israel.
Yeah. So, well, how is that connected to the end times, to the return of the Messiah, and to Israel, and being the light to the nations, etc., etc.? Well, very good question you've asked. Now, the end times are a period of suffering, like the Exodus from Egypt. So Israel goes through travail. They call it, there's a scripture which says about the travail of Jacob, and it goes through travail, just like in the Exodus coming out of Egypt. There's travail coming out through the plagues and through the oppression of the Egyptians before the liberation. And it's interesting, Nathalie, that the rabbis often describe the return of Messiah just like the Exodus. That is going to be very, very similar to that. So this is something we're going through. And by the way, I just want to say something, that many of you across the world are also suffering. We understand that, and we'd be very interested to hear from you, by the way, what's happening where you are. That does really, it affects us, and it's very important to hear what's happening in your nation. And what are the travails, the suffering you're going through. Now, Nathalie, you've got things to share with us today. Nathalie brings teaching from a Hebraic perspective and a view of a Hebraic perspective. So what have you got to share with us today? So
the interesting thing, we were speaking together and we're speaking with friends, and we're looking at the history, because it's important to see what we are in a certain point now. But it's like we are going somewhere, okay? And God is preparing us, and as you say, humanity, for the millennium, which is like a Shabbat time, is the 7th millennium, which is like the 7th day. We can see the parallel, which would be a Shabbat when God's presence will be there. And so I was looking at when the time, there was in the 60s and the 70s, there was the Jesus movement, which was a big thing that started in America, but he went all over Europe and all over the world, really, Australia and New Zealand and in a lot of places, really impacted the churches. And when you think about it, it's always parallel to what God is doing also with Israel. So this was the Jesus movement, was in the 60s, 70s, and Jerusalem was in the hand of the Jewish people in 1967 after the 6-day war, which was like a miracle. It was just amazing what God has done for the Jewish people. So spiritually, there was something happening. And a lot of Christians were not satisfied in the churches, and there was an outpouring also of the Holy Spirit, and people were speaking in tongues. Lots of people were becoming Christians, and they wanted something different. Now, like Kiss Green, there was a lot of music. Maranatha also in America started to do a lot of worship music that we didn't really have before, and it's impacted all the world, I would say. Me, I was in France at that time, and I was impacted also by that. I was impacted by the charismatic renewal. And the thing is, I need to tell you, when the first time I went to a charismatic movement, it was in Grenoble in the 70s, and I was in my teens. And when we arrived over there, people were already praying because we arrived a bit late. And when I arrived over there, it was like I was with the apostles, I was with the disciples, I was with Jesus. I was like back into the time of the Act of the Apostles. And it's interesting because when I was doing some studies yesterday, they were saying exactly that. And I'm like, it's exactly what happened to me. And people were speaking in tongues and receiving the gift of the Holy Spirit. And there was like a buzz of God in our life. And we were never been the same. So this is interesting. And I could see like all this music was important. And then there was some more like Jewish music, and like even during that time in the charismatic movement was sing Evenu Shalom Aleichem. We sang that song so many times, and I really think now we have to look with God's perspective. I really think that God was trying to bring us to our Jewish roots, the Hebrew roots of our faith. I've been involved with that, but I didn't have a clue that is what God wanted to do. I didn't really know my Bible. I was like a nice little Catholic girl, and I didn't know my Bible because we don't really study it. And it's like 10 or 15 years after I really say, okay, God, I want to follow you. And then I started to read seriously my Bible. And not only that, he started to show me and to read the Bible like it is a living book. And everything's changed. But you can see that he was starting already to impact our souls with Hebrew roots because Yeshua is Jewish, okay? And so he was trying to give that. When you see Joseph, when he was in Egypt with all these brothers, he's helping Egypt, and he's like one below Pharaoh, which is a very high rank, and he was like dressed like a Pharaoh. So his brothers couldn't recognize him. And I like this because it's like really like we have made Jesus like an Egyptian, but he's really Jewish. And there is a time, and he allowed that too. And there is a time when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers and say, hey, I'm not like Pharaoh, I'm your brother. And I think we will see something in the future. It will be obvious for all the world. But meanwhile, us as Christians, with this music we're starting, and I have more Jewish music, and suddenly it's like slowly people started to say, hey, we need to go back to the Torah, I will say, which is the Torah is not the law as it is written in most of our Bible. The Torah, it means instruction of God. Like Shabbat is important, the feasts are important. And slowly, we are looking at the months, the Hebraic months, the new moon, you know, all this kind of thing was like really remote of our life. And there is really a movement all around the world. And I was really pleased when I was doing the studies yesterday to see, okay, we are on the right track. And it was written when I was reading an article, they say, okay, this is till the return of Yeshua, of Jesus. And I'm like, yes, you're right. And we need to be more like him. And we need to know more his brothers and his sisters. We need to know more about Israel. He's coming back in Jerusalem. His throne will be in Jerusalem. So all of that, we need to be aware of all these things. So I felt that very encouraged yesterday when I saw that God is really bringing us somewhere, and it's for all of us. And by the way, you know, I wrote this book now, it's about 10 years ago. No, more now. It was in 2011, and it's The Beauty of the Hebrew Language. And you can find it on our website. And please buy it. You will see it's just to give you a bit of the Hebrew language. And this is something so that many people start to learn the Hebrew language. Because when you read the Torah in Hebrew, you see the beauty of it. And it's so important. So this is where we are at in the world. In the midst of all the turmoil.
Right, and if you you can go to the website, and there's all the information on there about the book. You can also register for the weekly newsletter, which Nathalie does. We also do a daily news story. You can register for that as well. All the information is on the internet. And you can also support us. We appreciate that. Financially, there's a donate page, and you can contact us. There's a contact page and everything, so a lot of information on the website, which is www.israelfirst.org. Now, Israel National News said that there was a 10-year-old boy severely affected by war. Many Israeli parents have made heartbreaking confessions about their children's behavior. Several teachers have reported unusual cases of school children displaying out of character behavior as the new year starts. We've just started, we've got the Gaza war is still happening as we've come in the studio today. And we've also had the school year start. The two things are happening together. In a heartbreaking confession, many parents reported that their children have been severely affected following their father's army service. In one particular case, the parent said, "My 10-year-old son Danny has a wild imagination and a sensitive heart, and knowing his father is in battle was far too much for him to cope with. He's suffering from severe anxiety and he stopped playing with his friends, preferring to stay at home with me all day. And he used to be the loudest kid in the room." So they've got separation anxiety is one of the things that's happening. "I know he needs help, but we can't afford it. And all I feel now is a huge amount of guilt for failing my son." Shavut Ranan said relatives of reservists, those are the people who are going, the army reservists, they call them that because Israel has two sections of the army. Those are the full-time soldiers who usually join up at 18 after they leave school. And then you have the reservists. Those are people who've served in the IDF before, very often in a job working, and then they are called up by the army to serve. So these are the reservists. And she says the relatives of the reservists are now struggling to manage a household on their own. So because the father's away, the husband's away, the dad's away, the kids are, are going to have, she's got to go to school, she's got to do the school run, she's got to do the work, she's got to look after the home, and all whilst her husband is away for months at a time. And
it's the head of the family.
Right.
This is the thing. Yeah.
Right. So this is something that's happening in Israel as well. So we've got also, as we mentioned at the beginning, the elderly people who've been evacuated. And there's a lot of, we've mentioned the evacuated people stories before. There's a lot of evacuees who are still suffering, particularly in the north, where they haven't been able to go back, but also the elderly people. And then there's the children, the school children, suffering because their fathers are away. So these two are very big stories, which is very important for you to know about, because sadly the mainstream media tends to just focus on the operations or what's happening in the war. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to have you with us. And as I say, visit the website. There's a lot of information there. It's www.israelfirst.org. And remember, we're the program that looks at the land, the people, and the language.